So, this evening we'll have the chance to explore what we have called work. The work of walking on this path, the work of purifying our minds and cultivating our lives, and embodying virtue and realizing liberation. In particular, we'll have a chance to talk about the relationship between a student and a teacher with regard to this work. As we discussed in the description of this talk, your teacher won't do your work for you. Your teacher won't purify your mind for you. Your teacher won't live an ethical life for you. Your teacher won't realize enlightenment for you. This we should look at from a few angles. One is, why is that? And why is it that so many traditions claim the opposite? And also, probably more importantly, is that bad? Meaning, wouldn't it be better if you found a teacher who did it for you? Wouldn't that be a better situation? Then you could walk the whole path without doing work, which seems perhaps like a superior method. Sort of like, wouldn't it be better if someone else could experience happiness and love and peace for me? Then I wouldn't have to do it. It's a good question, so we should explore that as well. So the first question is it the case? A lot of the time people will think it is the case, say, well, I have to do the work on my own anyway. I have to do this. I have to walk the path myself, and so there isn't a reason to have a teacher. But I would suggest that if you think that way, then you don't understand that you have to do this yourself. No matter what happens, whether you have a teacher or not, you equally have to do the work yourself. Whether you have a spiritual friend who can guide you, you nonetheless have to do the work yourself. And why is that? As my primary teacher, Harada Roshi, has said, why is it that you have to do this work to realize enlightenment? Well, because you are obstructing it. You have to realize enlightenment because you are obstructing it. A lot of the time we have the impression in our world, in our modern consumerist approach to everything, including enlightenment, that enlightenment is some kind of product, some kind of object over there, and I have to get over there and get it, and then I will have acquired it, and I can keep it, and then I will be one of those people who got enlightenment, and I'll be spiritually wealthy, unlike those other people who remain spiritually impoverished because they don't have this thing that I got. And if that's the case, then of course it would make sense that our goal would be to produce as many replicas of enlightenment as possible and provide them to people at a very low cost so that lots of people could have enlightenment quickly. But that is a completely backward model of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not something that people acquire. Enlightenment is not an acquisition that we didn't have and then found and then can possess and perhaps reproduce, and then give to those other flawed souls who remain without it. That is totally wrong. The appropriate way to look at it is that enlightenment can only be obstructed. Enlightenment cannot be acquired, but it can be obstructed. And that which obstructs it is what we're trying to purify and overcome with this path. Because unfortunately, that which obstructs it is what we are generally trying to protect and defend when we're not walking this path. Sometimes we call that my patterns, my fixations, or even perhaps myself, if you wanted to put it that way. That the act of obstructing enlightenment is the act of self, the act of reifying some kind of a self. Once we've done that and we believe that a self is clear and established, then of course my possessions becomes viable, becomes feasible, and then out of that perspective we conceive of enlightenment as something that I will acquire. But that's an obstructed view, not a clear view. It is more appropriate to consider enlightenment to be not losable, not something that can be lost, not something that can be forgotten or forsaken or abandoned. And why is that? Because it can't be found. It can't be acquired or achieved or possessed. And why is that? Well, because it can't be lost. That's why. If you can't lose something, then you can't find it. I wrote in a poem at one point that this truth that we're talking about, this awakening, is always true. It's always the case. It's not only the case sometimes under certain circumstances, it is always the case. If it's always the case, then it is right here. If it's always right here, then you can't lose it. And if you can't lose it, then you can't find it. Not possible to find something that you didn't lose at all, ever. So awakening, the embodiment of wisdom, isn't an acquirable thing. And on the contrary, many of the ancient descriptions of awakening is the relinquishment of all acquisitions. So you relinquish all acquisitions. You relinquish everything you've ever acquired, or you could say consumed. And then you could say, if you want to put it poetically, what's left is enlightenment. When all of those acquisitions have been dropped and the holding on to them, the act of holding on to them, is no longer obstructing awakening. So we are the ones who have to do it, who have to do this work. But it oftentimes doesn't feel like we want to. And so the earliest highly sophisticated version of a kind of practice in which this work is completely obviated by a specific technique that I know of is the Jodo Shinshu school in Japan, in 13th century Japan. You could say it started in the 12th century, but since the 13th century, you could say flourished there, and is right now spreading around the world. And the idea there is very simple. If you chant the Buddha's name, and this is a different Buddha from Shakyamuni Buddha or Gautama Buddha who lived in India 2,500 years ago. It's a different Buddha named Amitabha Buddha. If you chant that Buddha's name, if you say reverence to Amitabha Buddha, then due to that Buddha's enormous virtue, due to that Buddha's extraordinary cultivation of virtue, you, through just that tiny little act, it's still a little work, you have to admit it. You have to say those words once or so. You say that, then whatever you may have done in your life or in any life, whatever you may have done, still because you said that, you've called on Amitabha Buddha's incredible compassion, and he will be sure that after you die, you will be reborn in what's called the Pure Land. And the Pure Land is excellent. It's a very good place to be reborn. It's a wonderful place to be. And beyond that, it's so perfectly constructed for awakening that anyone, no matter what, can get enlightened if they get reborn there. No matter what a terrible person you are, you can still get enlightened if you're reborn there. And so it's guaranteed that if you get reborn there, you'll be enlightened before you pass away from that realm, before you die. So this is a pretty good system, you might think. This is pretty good. All I have to do is say, Namo Amitabha Buddha, and then I'm reborn in the Pure Land after I die, and then I'll be very, very happy for a long time, and then I'll get enlightened and be liberated. So this basic system was then cultivated in a similarly sophisticated way thereafter in Europe. And for a lot of us, that's what we experience Christianity as. We think of Christianity as that you have faith in Jesus. And because of that, you'll get reborn in heaven, and then there isn't an enlightenment section of that course. That's the end. You get reborn one time. Because in what we now think of as Christianity, there's rebirth, but just one time. And so then you'll be reborn in heaven, and there it is, and depending on the formulation, it's fantastic in different ways. So again, this seems very appealing. This seems like a good system. It seems like a very good way to move on the spiritual path. So why? We already went over some reasons that it's still important that we do this work, that we do the work. But I'd like to look a bit more into why one might hope that we could do the work on our own. Why would we hope for that? Why would that be exciting and compelling? So, it's very beautiful outside right now. The sun is setting. It's been a wonderful day. Very pretty winter day here in Vermont. The trees are doing a wonderful job of being trees in the winter in Vermont, and doing a great job of reflecting this pink sunlight. The sky is doing a wonderful job of changing color in the evening from the deep blue that it was today to this orange. The birds are doing a wonderful job of flying around and chirping, and somehow, I don't know how, surviving the winter. I don't know how they do it. The snow is doing a very good job of glistening as the sun shines off of it. It is unfailing in its ability to glisten when the sun shines on it. And I had the chance today to spend some time outside. I had the chance to go out there and be awed, be amazed at the magnificence of nature. I saw, as I went through the woods, a little mouse hole in the snow. The mouse hops out of it and hops about on the snow, and then it finds another way and goes back in, and there's a whole series of tunnels under the snow where the mice, I don't know what they do either to survive the winter, but somehow they use those tunnels to survive. And the whole time gravity kept working, and I was able to stay on the ground, and which is where I should be, and appreciate all of this, and breathe the air, and feel the cold, and settle in to this marvelous Vermont winter. That experience is magical. It's miraculous. And it's so nice, it's so miraculous that places like Vermont and other places would like, and to a certain extent do a good job at, packaging it and selling it. There's a modern phenomenon called tourism, which I think a lot of us can't imagine is merely a modern phenomenon. It was invented recently. For most of human history, there was no tourism. Nowadays, there's tourism. And you think, oh, I would like to have a certain kind of experience that can only be experienced in Vermont or in Greece or in Patagonia or wherever. And so I will go to such and such a place and have that experience. I'm willing to pay quite a bit of money to have that experience. And then ideally, I will acquire photographs and other memory tools so that I can keep that experience with me, so that I can wring as much out of it as possible and make the cost of that acquisition worth it. And of course, there's some benefit there. There is some benefit there, that I have gotten the sort of experience that I want. There's another kind of benefit to the sort of experience I had today. I wasn't actually planning on going where I went. I didn't have the aspiration beforehand to go and be in the woods at that time and at that place. It just happened. And as I was there, the sense I am acquiring the experience of nature. This nature is valuable because it is giving me the experience that I want. That approach to life fell away. That approach to life dissolved, disintegrated. So that the exciting part of the experience was not me getting what I want. And I wasn't even at the center of the experience. I wasn't the core of that experience. In other words, I didn't benefit from that. Meaning, of course, now we can talk about benefits to my health. I was outside, now my cardiovascular system is improved and such. But at the time, psychologically, I was refreshed by nature or something. But at the time, the salient part of the experience was precisely the fact that it wasn't about me. That I forgot myself in it, and so you could say that it didn't benefit me at all. Or at least it didn't benefit me much. There wasn't much of me to be benefited around at the time. I didn't make it into the woods. The woods didn't make it into me. That duality, that distinction fell away. And when I say it fell away, I mean it actually falls away. I have this sense that for a lot of us, we believe that in reality, I am walking through nature. That's the truth. But when I'm in nature, I can forget that true truth. And it's as if I'm not there. As if there's just nature. But soon enough, I'll return to the true truth, which is that I am here, I'm a person who's separate from nature, and nature's over there, and maybe I'll go into nature, maybe nature will come into me, but in the end, that dichotomy remains. You can cover it over, but it's still there. But the essential part of that experience is seeing that the distinction, the division, is the construction. The division between the two is the act of making something up. That is the made-up way of looking at it. A less made-up way of looking at it is to not actively produce that perceptual distinction between me and nature. So under those circumstances, we see that I am not different from nature, and if I am not different from nature, then I actually can't be found at all. I can't be found in the experience. There isn't a place for me in that experience, and so benefit to me becomes irrelevant. And yet, so all that's pretty good. All that's pretty interesting. It's really quite an amazing thing, and I expect a lot of us here know exactly what I'm talking about. I was describing it, and you know exactly what I'm referring to. You have experienced the thing I'm saying, and you know what I'm talking about. Yes? So you can say, oh, he said it this way, I like that way, that's how he said it. Oh, I think I might have said that part a little differently. But in any case, we're talking about the same thing. We know what we're talking about. We're talking about something. So that's good. But here now is the mysterious part. We, meaning I, this person who disappeared in that experience, that person did that. Went into nature and forgot themselves. That's very strange. That's very mysterious. That person actually did something that made that person obsolete. And yet, that person did it. The person did that thing. That's very mysterious. That's very strange. I don't know how to explain that, actually, at all. The other part I just explained. You can say, well, division, construction, don't construct the division, ta-da, nature. But how did someone who was deconstruct that construction? How did this person who was divided away from nature do something so as to stop dividing that person away from nature? Because that person was produced by the division away from nature, which that person then did something about in order to break free of. This is actually extremely mysterious. I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining this part, but it is very strange that that's possible at all. But if you think that's strange, here's the really strange part. That person purified themselves. Yes? That person purified themselves, but that person was not at any time separate from nature in that whole purification process, which means that that person, in purifying themselves, purified the entire world. It's just logic now. We've come back to logic. Now it's just reason. Okay? So we realize that A equals B. There's a very mysterious thing in which A made A doesn't equal B into A equals B. That was weird. But now it's just logic again. A equals B, which means that A being purified is B being purified. So by purifying your own mind, by purifying yourself, you are purifying the entire world. And why would you want to disempower yourself from that extraordinary power? You get to purify the entire world in every moment of your life by purifying your own mind right now in this moment. Why would you want to ask someone else to do that at all? You get to do that. It's very mysterious, as I say. But if you actually see that you can do that, you wouldn't want someone else to do it for you. Of course, you might want them to do it, too. That would be good. Yes, it's nice of you to help them to do it, but you wouldn't want someone else to do it on your behalf because you get to do it. It's the thing. So, okay, this is hard to explain. So, here's an example. As you all know, when I start talking about things, I don't know how to explain it. It's too complicated. What do I do next? Sports metaphor. Okay, so the sports metaphor in this case is that I was on the ski team a ski team, and I was talking to a very good skier. Eventually, was a professional skier, and we were talking about how much we enjoy skiing. And some of you may have a sense of how much I enjoy skiing. I really, really enjoy skiing. And he also really, really enjoys skiing a lot. And he said, it's so strange, I'm out there skiing and I look around and I can tell that no one else is enjoying it as much as I am. And he's right, actually. I also can tell. He said, I'm worried about these people. I'm worried about how little they enjoy skiing, how little they enjoy life. I mean, why do they ski? What are they doing out there? And then, I can't help but, I know I'm not supposed to think this, but why are they living? They don't seem all that happy. I'm happy, and it's true, he is. I'm happy. I go out skiing, it's fantastic. I love it. I'm happy the whole time. And then every next time I go skiing, I get better at being happy while skiing. So I'm happier now than I was last week. I was happier last week than I was when I was younger. it's wonderful. I get to do this, and I don't know how to explain to them how to enjoy skiing. I can teach them how to ski faster, but how do you teach someone to enjoy skiing? How do you do that? And so we talked about this for quite a while. Mostly because we're just worried about these people who don't have a way to enter a blissful state regularly. And we're worried. That must be awful. And so he's attempting to offer, he's trying to offer the ability to be truly happy. But that ability, the thing that people don't quite catch, is that ability to be happy is the ability to purify your mind, to do this work. We have the impression that you do the work so that you can be happy afterwards. Because you did the work, you can now be happy. So why can't someone else do the work for me so that I can be happy without doing the work? Yes? That looks at the happiness as a kind of product, as a kind of consumer object. And you have to pay a certain price in order to get it. And you want the price to be as low as possible in order to get this thing that's a good thing, happiness. But the price that you have to pay is your suffering. That's the cost of this path. The thing you have to give up, relinquish, pay with, is suffering. So you don't want the cost to be as low as possible. You want the cost to be as high as possible. This is completely crazy. You all grew up in the US, I suppose. Totally crazy, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? Cost is always bad, right? Right? I mean, we even have it in economics. We have the benefit-cost analysis. Cost is inherently not a benefit, but it's the opposite. But in this case, in the spiritual world, the cost is suffering, which is to say that the purification of your mind, the work of walking this path, is the happiness. It's not this bad thing that you have to get through so that you can get a good thing that for some reason those mean spiritual teachers won't give you until you did the bad stuff. It's not like that. It's that you get right now, in this moment, to relinquish suffering. That's not so bad, and it's not something that we need someone else to do for us on our behalf. That's a very sad way to look at it, actually. Why doesn't someone else relinquish my suffering on my behalf? Well, first of all, the reason is because you're the one who's holding on to it. That's why. You're holding on to suffering. You're actively holding on to it. Okay? Okay. I don't know if I'm getting this across. So you have this beautiful nature outside. The issue on the planet isn't that we aren't producing enough nature. Okay? The problem of the human being now in the modern age is not that we have failed to sufficiently produce nature. Are you following this? No. Anyone following this out there? Okay. We didn't fail to make trees that sparkle in the sunlight. That's not what happened. That's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is that we're living in ways that destroy, obstruct, undermine the natural flourishing of that beauty. No one is following this, maybe. Okay, good. Some people. So the challenge isn't how can we make nature be better at being nature. The challenge is how can we directly relinquish the things that cause us to not rejoice as nature. That's the thing I'm trying to say. So, in the same way, we don't produce enlightenment. We don't make awakening happen more. That's not the way it works. Enlightenment isn't a product or an acquisition that we need more of. The resistance to awakening that is suffering is what we stop producing. That's that we stop doing that. We stop making the things that prevent this joy from arising that we didn't make, or even expect, or understand, or want, or consume. So, since that's the structure of the path, we don't set it up so that someone else will do that on our behalf. Because we are the ones who get to do that. Right now, in this moment, we get to not produce suffering. We get to relinquish the causes of suffering right now. Or we get to do that. We get to produce the cause. We get to hold on to the cause of suffering and produce suffering. We can do that too. But either way, that is what we're doing right now. At this moment, we are involved in it one way or the other. And when you see it that way, there's a sense of an incredible empowerment. In this moment, I get to cause suffering throughout the entire universe, or resolve suffering throughout the entire universe. At this moment, I have that power, and in a deeply mysterious way, in exercising that power appropriately, even the person who gains benefit from that joy is lost. Yeah. So there isn't, under those circumstances, anyone at all to do the work, much less someone else.